Hey everybody, Jack Sperner, Bible 101. Thank you for watching. Once again, former children's pastor who is going through his children's ministry lessons and teaching them for adults, kind of doing some things that I didn't do in children's ministry, like this entire lesson that I'm doing right now was not part of the children's ministry. I made it this week, but it kind of goes in more depth, goes in line with the civil disobedience we've been talking about and By Our Love, and also in Bible 101. Like I said, if you want to check out what we said about civil disobedience in By Our Love, that's By Our Love for Jack and Mary, and there's a link down in the description there, so you can check that out. Remember to like, share, subscribe, hit that subscribe button and the bell so you get notified when there are updates. Updates come every Friday at 8 in the morning. I don't know why I picked 8, I just do. So today is really kind of a sidebar. We're talking about God, and last week we talked about God as King. So that come with the subject then. I talked about Pontius Pilate, who was in charge, where'd your authority come from? And so God is the ultimate authority. God is king. That's what we were talking about last week. So as a little sidebar to that, to go in line with what we're talking about in By Our Love, let's look at people in the Bible who were civilly disobedient because God was king in their life. God was higher and more important than the laws of the land. And there are actually people in the Bible who did that. Now, what are God's laws? We're going to go through real quickly. Just do the 10 Commandments. Basically, man has millions of laws and God has 10. So have no other gods before you. That's the first one. You should have no idol. You should not misuse his name. And remember the Sabbath day. So, by the way, in Bible 101, we are actually going to have an entire section on the 10 Commandments where I go through each one of them more in depth. That'll probably be a year from now because there's a lot in these lessons. We try to keep them short. 5 is honor your father and mother. 6 is you shall not murder. 7 is you should not commit adultery. 8 is you should not steal. 9 is you should not bear false witness. And then 10 is you should not covet anything that belongs to your neighbor. So those kind of sum those up. So what happens when what God requires and that man requires are different? When the first 4 commandments deal with man's relationship with God, and if a civil law is going to break one of those commandments, you have to choose to obey God over man. Daniel 6. Now, the entire Daniel 6 is the story of King Darius and his helper guys, his counselors or advisors said, hey, king, we should have 30 days where you're the only one that anyone prays to. You're the only one that anyone worships. And King Darius thought that was a great idea. So he signed it. So I'm going to read from Daniel 6 through 8, and you can read the entire story in Daniel 6. I'm going to do my best. This is a long section, and my reading out loud with my dyslexia is kind of an issue, but let's see how I do. So these administrators and satraps went as a group to the king and said, may King Darius live forever. Smoozing them up right off the bat. The royal administrators, prefects and satraps, advisors and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except for you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now, your majesty issued the decree and put it in writing so that it cannot be altered, in accordance with the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be repealed. So King Darius put the decree in writing. Now, this was a setup because they knew that Daniel went to his window every day and prayed to God and worshiped God in his window. So what did Daniel do? Well, being the good, civilly obedient citizens of the Medes and Persians, he, of course, quit praising God. Wrong. You know the story. Daniel was civilly disobedient, and he continued to pray, and he got thrown in the lion's den, and God protected him, and he was saved from the lion. In fact, God shut the lion's mouth. So there's case one of someone who was civilly disobedient. And then one of my favorite, not my favorites because she was a prostitute. No, one of my favorites that I like to talk about is Rahab. Rahab wasn't even a Jew. Rahab, this is in the Old Testament. Joshua 2 is the story. So you can read Joshua 2 for the story of Rahab and the spies, Caleb and Joshua, coming into Jericho. And we're going to go to Hebrews 11:31. Now, it's basically the king said, because they knew that Israel was coming and that Israel had been conquering every place they'd come. And he said, hey, if these Israelites come, let me know. Let us know. We can arrest them. We can, don't let them scope out, don't want them scoping out Jericho. So Rahab, what she did is she hid them and protected them and let them out through the window. And so they could escape. And Rahab was saved. Her part of the wall did not collapse and she did not die. So, and now Rahab, civilly disobedient to the king, but obeying a higher law to God, she ends up in the famous Hall of Faith in Hebrews 11:31. By faith, the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. By faith, she had faith that God, and she had faith that the God of Abraham was truly God. And so she was civilly disobedient. So there's two examples. So we have one more example, and there are other examples. I can talk about the Jewish people in Egypt, the mother and father of Moses, the midwives who did not kill baby Moses. They were civilly disobedient to Pharaoh. So Peter and John had been arrested. And we talk a little bit about that in By Our Love. You can go back and see that. But they had been arrested. And they had been arrested for preaching Jesus because the Jewish leaders were like getting tired of this. You're preaching against Jewish law. You're preaching this new thing going on. Well, shut up. So this is what Acts 4:18 through 29 is the whole story. And this is a little chunk of it. So they called them and charged them not to speak or teach at all in the name of Jesus. Don't speak or teach in the name of Jesus. But Peter and John answered them, whether it is right in the sight of God to listen to you rather than to God, you must judge. For we cannot speak of what we cannot but speak of what we have seen and heard. And then it goes on to say that we must obey God rather than man. So Peter and John were civilly disobedient because God is king, and that's what we're talking about. God is king. Daniel disobeyed because God is king. Rahab disobeyed because God is king. Peter and John disobeyed because God is king. The bottom line is obey God. He is king rather than man. Now, it can be very hard to do that when everyone else isn't. So stand up for what is right, and you need to have a relationship with God when things get tough, to do the right thing, to not bend the knee, to not fall back and do what everyone else is doing. But there we have three examples of, actually four, mentioning the Moses and his mother and father, and the midwives who did not turn Moses over to the Egyptians, of being civilly disobedient So maybe someday, not on Bible 101, but we will talk about in By Our Love, about the conflict between Romans that says obey the civil authorities and the civil disobedience in the Bible. Hey, thank you everybody for watching. Next week, we're going to continue with our study of who God is. And this was a little study on how we should respond to certain situations because God is king. Okay, everybody, thanks for watching. Hey, leave some comments about what you think about civil disobedience and these people in the Bible. God bless everybody. Remember, like, share, hit the bell, subscribe. God bless. We'll see you next week. Bible 101. Bye.